Hey guys, this is Courtney from the AstroBiz podcast, where we talk about business, astrology, spirituality, and all things woo. Each week, I interview incredible business owners, give you guys astrological updates that are channeled from the heavens, and I also give you guys insights about anything you need to know about spirituality topics. Please don't forget to leave a review if you like these episodes. You guys can always find me under Willow's Bloom on Instagram, YouTube, and on willowsbloom.com. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, today we have Kristen from the Magick Grove here on the podcast. She is a friend of mine. She's an amazing oracle and tarot reader. She actually just gave me a reading recently. You guys should definitely check out her website for the Magick Grove. And she also is a nature witch, you guys. And that's something that I'm not super familiar with. So I'm really excited to hear what a modern day witch is from her. She has a background in entertainment and technology, so she's had a huge life shift, but she's always been very spiritual. And I can't wait for her to tell her story. And there's one in particular that's really fascinating about her actually hosting a famous award show. So I'm really excited for her to be on the podcast today. Kristen, thank you so much for being here.
Hello, you guys. I'm so excited to be here. And as you all know, Courtney is amazing, and she was on my show. So we're trading places.
Yes, yeah, she has a show that's on the Magic Grove on her Facebook group. It's called Tea Magick. So we all go with our tea mugs and we talk about all things witchy and spiritual. And I went on there to talk about astrology. So if you guys like that stuff, then you should definitely go check it out over on Facebook.
Yes, thank you.
So, can you just get us started by talking about your story? Because I know that you've had some pretty big transformations over the last few years, and I would love to hear about where you used to be and how you even ended up where you are now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that you mentioned all of those wonderful things. Thank you for noting those things I've worked on. I was just telling Courtney earlier that I was an art major growing up. Well, let me back up a little bit. As a child, I've always been interested in fairies and magic. I always felt like I had a mystical connection to this other world. My mother is very into fantasy and into reading and sci-fi. And so I grew up surrounded by these stories, all of these books from, writers and authors talking about these worlds that I felt like really didn't exist. Back then it was 1977, so we were told those worlds didn't exist. But I always felt like this mystical connection to the earth and to nature. I grew up in a really small town right next to a state park, so I was always outside. I mean, it was never indoors. I was constantly playing or ice skating or climbing trees. And so I really grew up with this fascination, curiosity, and love for nature and for the environment. And again, like this connection. So, um, through growing up, later on, going to school, through my young adulthood, it became very prevalent that I was in a society that didn't really feel the same way that I did, that wasn't as connected. I was also a very sensitive child. So I grew up in a world that was very masculine dominant. Like my childhood was the 80s. And if any of you had lived through the 80s, you know it was all about power and materialism. And if women wanted to get ahead, they had to act like men. And it really was this like very focused on materialistic things. I don't really know how else, but I mean, you all know if you lived through the 80s. Whereas I was a child that grew up and felt like I was connected to something bigger. And so my story really starts there. And my growth transformation that we could probably get into a little bit more specifics, I did. I had a degree in art. I went to work for corporate America as a designer, as a producer, as a project manager. I was in that three-dimensional world. And there hit a point where I was like, wait a minute, I am not happy. I am not happy working for other people. I'm not happy not being a leader. I just feel like this life is so humdrum and there's something more. And about 2009, I would say, I took a hosting class, and I was an actor for a little while, didn't really love it. But I was a creative person. So I took a hosting class, And I realized like, wow, I'm really good at this. I'm really good at being myself on camera. And that decision, that moment took me into I would say the next like many, many years of my life where I started creating my own content. So I'm like a redheaded, witchy person into fantasy. I was a mega geek, but I kind of went the geek route. So I just started creating content for people like me. Like, well, I'm not really seeing the right roles for women on camera. So I'm going to create my own content. I'm going to start creating my own things. And that's how my award show really was born is it was a genre show. It's called the Geeky Awards. It was a genre show for people creating sci-fi, fantasy, comic book, out of the ordinary content. Now with Marvel, it's really big, but back then, that type of content wasn't taken seriously. Those people weren't taken seriously. Those worlds weren't taken seriously. And so I created this award show to get people that were creating this work seen. Well, I did a really great job with it. It was a massive show. It got like billions in media. Anyone could take a look at that and go, wow, that was a really big success. And I love that show so much. But what happened was during the process of creating that show, I realized that like I had a voice, but what I was creating wasn't necessarily the thing I was meant to do with that leadership and that power. And it was like a stepping stone. I was speaking for people that weren't heard, but it wasn't really true to me. And what I mean by that is like, I am a huge geek. It is what I love, but there was something more. I was missing that connection that I had as a child to the earth, to magic. And that in about 2012 and 13 is when I went through a huge spiritual awakening. And, you know, we can talk about that process a little bit more where everything went away. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Corporate America sucked. The idea of working for other people was awful. I love my show, but it was so difficult because I was still in an industry that was very masculine dominant. And again, the work wasn't as deep as I wanted it to be. And somewhere around 2016, I went to Ireland and I had this massive download that, well, just to back up a little bit, my spiritual awakening was caused because my whole entire my ego was dying, my body was dying. My acupuncturist actually suggested to me that I look into, she's like, well, you love fairies, you love magic. Maybe you should start reading those books. Like, I feel like you're losing it, you know, that you're really trying to find yourself. And so I started reading books on witchcraft, something I knew nothing about, but immediately connected to. And this is about 2013, 2014. And I started practicing a little bit of spells here and there. And I start meditating and feeling like amazing. And I was like, wow, this is that connection I was missing from when I was a child. And my spiritual awakening, my Kundalini awakening came on, I believe it was October 14th, 2014. I had to look at the date. It was 2 days before my birthday. I did a massive divination spell under a blood moon. So, you know about eclipses, they're really powerful. And I was like, this is a good idea. Not knowing anything, I had to mention that because it's, you know, astrology here. And 2 days later, boom, I woke up. I woke up. Everything came crashing down in my world. You know, anybody that's gone through the Kundalini awakening experience, it was really, really intense. Um, and I'd say that from that moment on, what came from that experience and something that I'm probably just coming into of the last few years was my soul calling. And that is to use all of those skills that I had growing up, but use that connection to the earth, but to use my leadership abilities, my abilities to create content, my ties to the entertainment industry to create content that was more in alignment with who I was. And that's why I have the show Tea Magick. That's why I have the group, the Magick Grove. The Magick Grove is for leaders changing the world with magic. It is my opportunity to, like you were on my show, put the spotlight on people that are out there changing the world. And that's for me to use that platform to help support that. I also, and I'll just touch base on this really quick. What I was going to say before is I went to Ireland and I had a major download about writing a book series. So I'm doing that as well. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about that. But your question was, that's just a bit about my journey, but that's how I got from A to B is really, I grew up with this. I went through the whole process of being sucked into the illusions and the limitations of society. And I finally came back to myself. I did the self work. I had the spiritual awakening. I came back to who am I really at an authentic level? And how do I want to? This is what we talked about on my show a minute ago. How do I want to serve the world with these gifts that I have? And that's where I'm at right now, is hopefully doing it.
Oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to say. It's like there's 10 different directions I want to go in. Okay. First, I just want to mention the fact that you have a stellium, you have so many planets in the 12th house and all in Aries. And to me, this represents strong leadership and leadership for a spiritual purpose. So I can
Mhm.
definitely understand and feel why you would feel like 80% fulfilled in your previous role. It was
Mhm.
activating those talents. You felt fulfilled, having a greater purpose in the world. But at the same time, you weren't going to the depths of the universe, which is really what the 12th house is about this like merging with the collective consciousness, becoming
Yes.
more one with the universe and really tapping into the deeper spirituality of life. And so with all of like with your sun there, with Venus there, with your moon there, I mean it was something that you needed in order to feel like you were truly alive. And so I totally see why you had that spiritual awakening. And I also want to mention the fact that you have a yod, which, if you guys don't know what a yod is, it's a rare alignment in a chart where it's basically like these three angles that make this little triangle. And whatever is at the top of the triangle, the apex, is part of your soul's calling. And it can get very intense when the yod is activated by an outer planet because it's like the universe is pushing you through kind of like karmic events, fated events that were going to happen that are normally a bit more intense than just a normal life event. And they will kind of give you a lot of turmoil, but it will ultimately help point you in the direction of the apex planet, of that true calling and of that destiny, which for you, Kristen, is about writing these books because Mercury is at the apex. And I've had a reading with her, so we've specifically talked all about this. But I think that's so beautiful that, first of all, that you were able to tap into what it feels like to be 100% in alignment. Because from my personal experience, I loved teaching English and I felt like I was really using my skills, but it wasn't 100% there. And I feel like a lot of the world is at that 80%. And I want to help them get to the 100%. And I feel like it's people like you who are teaching and who are creating a platform for other leaders as well that's really going to help people do that. And so I do want to talk about your spiritual awakening, but before we do that, can we touch on the books? Because obviously that's what
Yes.
the awakening was about. That was what you're
Yes.
being called to do. So what are the books?
Absolutely. And, we're talking about spiritual awakening, you guys. I just want to mention that in 2013 or 2012, when the ascension started, I went through that big awakening. And, because I know someone else might experience that. And then in a 2017, I kind of thought I was done. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm awake and I'm practicing witchcraft. That is when I went to Ireland and I got introduced to this story that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. Then the yod got activated. So I like to tell people I had like two massive spiritual awakenings. And I'm like, for the love of God, if I have to go through this again, I might cry. 'Cause most people are like, I had one. I was like, yo, I had like two. And it was the same process over. So that is the beautiful thing about this yod and how complex it would be. And I'm just saying that for other people that might be watching your show and they're like, whoa, I have a yod too. Once that gets activated, it's like a spiritual awakening all over again. But that yod is in 2016 when I went to Ireland. Basically, I knew I had to let go of my show. 2016 was 2015 15, the end of the year was the last Geeky Awards, and I had struggled for a while with like, I know that I'm not meant to do this anymore, and it was really difficult letting go because it was my baby. But again, I was feeling that only 80% alignment. Like I know I'm kind of close. And what it was I was speaking with the show. I was using my authority and my platform and my voice to speak for people that weren't being heard. And so when I went to Ireland, I first of all went to Avalon with my friend Amber beforehand, and I remember looking. I mean, we had this beautiful place. If you've never been to Avalon, you guys need to read the book Mist of Avalon and look into the Arthurian legend of King Arthur actually came from the Lady of the Lake. That was his mother. She was a high priestess. There was magic. Avalon is like this beautiful magical place. It's now called Glastonbury in England. So anyway, we went there and I was looking at this beautiful tower on the tour in the hill. And I went to bed that night and I just felt this like sensation come over me. And I was like, okay, I don't know, something's like in my body or like transforming my body right now. And I think that was like that final Kundalini. But what it did was it sort of opened me up to the next part of our trip was when we went to Ireland. I felt like I was so much more aware and I was in tune, and we got to Ireland and I started feeling like I've been here before. There's something here for me. I don't know what it was. I think I ended up getting like the flu when I was there, which is crazy. But as we were on these tours, this gentleman, Jonathan, our tour guide, started talking about the famine. And he was telling us like the real story of the famine that, we know of the famine as like, oh, the potatoes and the Irish and a few people died. The real story is that millions of people died because Ireland was so oppressed by the English for hundreds of years. They were living on one strand of potato and one strain of potato. And the blight, the fungus that hit Ireland that final year, they had had other blights, but this big one in 1845 happened to attack that one strain of potato. And they were without food for several years. While this was happening, England owned the country. They were continuously exporting food from the country, basically taking all of the food that could have saved all of these millions of people's lives, taking it out of the country for money, for power, for their own gain. And at that point, England was one of the biggest trade countries in the world. So this man is telling me this story, and I am livid. I'm like, what in the fuck? Like, this is abuse of power at its worst. And so when I left the country, I was like, I can't let this story go. Like, not everyone knows this. I didn't know this. So of course I started going around telling everybody, and they're like, whoa, I had no idea. And at that time, like I said, I had this spiritual awakening years before. I was so open to my new gifts that I had started getting a lot of like, I would hear voices and I would start hearing like characters, and a story started forming. And for the next few years, it took me a few years to kind of not maybe like it took me a year to kind of realize that there was a story that needed to be told that I was here to tell. So at first I thought it was a film, then I thought it was a TV series, and then I realized that was just the process of figuring out that it was actually meant to be a book series so that I could write the story. But the story is about, at its root level, it's about Ireland during the famine and the abuse of power. Everything that we're seeing happening in America right now with oppression, with, the abuse of power, all of that happened in 1845 Ireland. So the basis of this story is what I just told you. There was a huge military occupation. It was a very violent place to be, especially for the Irish. They were like throwaway lives to the English. It didn't really matter if they died. It was just a really hard time, and I'm going to be going into a lot of that in the books. But the main part of the story is what I didn't realize was the main part of the story until I started writing it. And it's a story about a girl, the main character, who you guys are gonna laugh because you know where I'm going with this, who grew up as this very beautiful, sensitive child and was forced into this masculine dominant society and had to survive. And her reaction was try to be like the patriarch, was to try to be one of the men. And her whole entire journey, she has a huge spiritual awakening. She has a remembrance of her magic. She does have magical powers that is tied to like the old Druid ways, which we can talk about in a moment. And her whole journey is her waking up and realizing that she is here to lead those people into a new compassionate world. And it took me a while to realize through my own life that I'm going to get teary in a minute, that that was my journey. And talking to Courtney about the yod and finally actually seeing it in on paper and seeing it as my soul alignment, seeing it in a chart form, just brought it on. This was, by the way, like a few weeks ago. It really brought everything into perspective that like this is why I am here in this moment. This is why I came here as a human right now. And this is why I'm telling that story, because it is going to help people now go through the same awakening, and the character, who is me, is going to lead them down that path. So this story, as you guys can see, is so much more than just healing of Ireland and healing of ancestors. It is a I like to call it a trigger. When people read it, I think they're really going to um, relate to it and see that this character can do these things, that this character can turn around and find her power and her magic and help create change. And I'm hoping that when people read it, they go out there and realize that they have that power as well.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, you're the author because of how strong you tell that story. It's very moving, and I
Thank
cannot
you.
wait to read that when it comes out. And I also just wanted to bring up that this, I think, is being born through you at this time for a very specific reason. Because right now, actually, we're going to be starting to experience when, with Uranus and Taurus, like there's going to be some disruptions to the food supply chain.
Yeah.
So it's we're going to next year, we're going to start experiencing more challenges, according to astrology, more challenges in receiving the food, or there's going to be like shipment issues or something along the lines of food where it's going to have to be done more locally. And then with, all the protests happening, I do see that expanding. I do see that continuing based off of the astrology. And I feel like we are very much headed in a, not the same, but a very, similar direction. And I've been watching some other astrologers talk about it. And to be honest, it's kind of freaking me out that what happened back then might not be so far off from what's happening now. But the difference is, I feel like now people are starting to go through spiritual awakenings at the same time. So I don't know how that will affect the way that things play out in history. I really hope that it is going to birth the new Aquarian age of equality, but I think through any birthing process, there's going to be a lot of pain. And so I feel like this book is going to be very cathartic for people and almost like a way for them to gain back their power and to also rely more on magic and on spirituality in order to get them through maybe the more challenging times that seem to be ahead of us.
Mm.
So that's pretty dark, but I would love to talk about your spiritual awakening and how that led you there and what that spiritual awakening felt like for you.
Absolutely. I want to comment on what you just said, if you don't mind, because you just actually get, I was just having this conversation as like you get messages from people. And here I am writing this book series, right? And I'm going through this and I'm like, oh, well, the only thing that hasn't happened is the blight. I'm like, okay, well, I'm married and I've lived through all of these things, the patriarch, now the military occupation. I mean, we're seeing that in the country right now with the Civil War. That happened in Ireland. There was continuous rebellions that got shot down because there were men in power. The English had more power. And here I'm thinking, well, the only thing that didn't happen was this blight, right? Like the food supply. And now I'm recalling my chiropractor telling me about what the earth is shifting, right? So this is something where I don't know, if this is related to what you're saying, but he was telling me that the earth is shifting. So we're going to have longer winters. There's going to be less agriculture. And he was talking about this food situation. And now you're putting two and two together. And I'm like, great. Okay. So now we are all going to be going through this blight. But I think what's important to realize, and this is what I want to get at, is that, and this is the book series is all about this, is that in the past is the past is the past. In the past, we were oppressed by men who had power because it was in the rule book that they could bring in military occupation and kill you if you did not listen to them. They were kings. If the king said something like the king didn't want you alive, you were dead. We are not in that place anymore. So I think that moving forward, if something like this does happen, we are now collectively, with the pandemic, with what's happening with civil rights, we are realizing that we have more power than we think. And we cannot let people that have all the money and all the power in the world do that again. So I just want to say that like that's really the main purpose of the story, is like we do have that self-power. And that is completely related to my spiritual awakening, because that's something that I had to discover about myself. Like I said, I grew up this very sensitive woman, this very sensitive girl. I was taught that to fit in, I had to be a tomboy. I lived in a world run by men, and this isn't to be sexist here, but it's a reality that, we do live in a world that's predominantly masculine dominant. But at the same time, it's not just that the world is run by men, it's that the world was driven by toxic masculine energy. And what I mean by that is so many of us were taught it's about your value is based on how much money you make, how hard you work, how much you slave over your business, or, da 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 da. We put zero value on the divine feminine within us all. We put zero value on our own intuition guiding our life. We put zero value. We used to tell people, or used to hear, that if you had feelings, you were weak. And so here I'm growing up as like a very deeply emotional child. And even in my adulthood, my parents are so amazing, but they're not super emotionally open. So I grew up in a society and a household where, like, if I had feelings, it was like I just felt wrong for having them. And when I went through my spiritual awakening, first of all, I think everyone kicks off their spiritual awakening by really feeling like I don't know what the hell is going on in my life anymore. I feel so not aligned with who I'm meant to be, that this needs to change. And you start looking at your life and you start questioning it. In 2013, I was creating this show and I was like, it seems like I have everything, but I feel like I have nothing of real value. If you looked at my life, anyone would have looked at it and said, that woman is a success. And in that masculine dominant sense, I was making money. I had this beautiful show. I had a partner. Everything on the outside looked amazing, but I was suffering so much on the inside because I was not myself. I was not letting the others part of me, that authentic divine feminine side of me, come out. And anyone that knows anything about magic, about witchcraft, I think those are two separate things, by the way. Magic to me is more universal. My definition of magic is that is your own personal power, knowing that you have power to make change in your life and in the world. Witchcraft is a set of tools and practices that certain people use, so they are a little bit different. But when I started practicing witchcraft, it was really about tapping into that innate wisdom. It really was about silencing and coming back to me and myself. Who am I? And when you're going down that journey of rediscovering your self power, you are forced to look at where you gave your power away. And a lot of times you give your power away to your own beliefs, to your own lives, to your own choices. And so that was a huge part of my mental spiritual awakening, was realizing that I had more power than I realized, but I wasn't recognizing it. And I also wasn't recognizing that my power did not come from success and material things. My power came from within me. And once you make that realization, there is a whole lot of stuff that comes up that you now have to purge your entire life. I mean, at that point, I was 30 something. So it's like entire lifetime of stuff that I had to purge. And that's what I had spent the next few years doing. Aside from that, I did at the same time go through a Kundalini physical experience. So that was very traumatic. Not only was my ego dying over here, and I was just like, what the hell is going on? And I was trying to mentally figure out what was happening. Because once you start waking up and you start like seeing through the veil, you're like, what's going on? I was getting downloads from past lives. I mean, I thought I was insane at one point. I think many people think that. But then my body was breaking down. I was sick. I had adrenal fatigue for several years. I was gaining weight. My hormones were out of control. Like I was just a broken human being. Like 2013, 14, I was a broken human being. And I knew that things needed to change. So at the depths of my spiritual awakening, it was very, very difficult. But I was able to read certain books. I had an acupuncturist who is a shaman and an angel, an earth angel. Thank God for her. She was my lifeline. I had friends that were witches. They were like, look, you're going through this thing. Like, we know what that's like. We've been there. You're waking up to your power, and this is the process. And through working with those mentors and those people, it kind of made me realize I wasn't crazy and that this was just the process of waking up. Back then, people really weren't talking about it, not like we are now. But there were still a lot of resources from people who were thought to be woo woo or people who were thought to be weird and strange that I found very comforting because I was like, wow, I know exactly what you're talking about right now. Um, and I just actually want to note that there was a book I read, Journey of Souls, that I think really put it into perspective. So I was having this spiritual awakening, but I didn't realize that I was a human, that I was a soul having a human experience until I read that book. That is when the bigger picture came into play. And I was like, wow, I actually came here for this awakening. I came here to do everything I've done in my life so far. I came here to do that. So it took away that victim mentality and it gave me more power. And that's really the place that I built my self power from, is knowing that I was a soul having a human experience. And this awakening physically, my body had to purge. Mentally, I had to shift my beliefs. All of these things needed to happen to step into that destiny that I came here for. And it's just, the mess was just part of the process.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad that you're telling us about this because uh honestly, I feel like I have been experiencing lately some shifts in that direction. And I wouldn't say it's like a full-on awakening, but I feel so different. And so I can really relate to a lot of the stuff that you're saying. And I've never actually heard someone describe it as when you're awakening, it's like you're awakening to the fact that you've been the one who's been limiting your own power. And like that is the only way to regain power is by realizing that you were the one who gave your
Yes.
power away to begin with. And it wasn't somebody else. It wasn't someone doing it to you. And I feel like, especially as women who have, traditionally been like an oppressed people, it's really beautiful to realize that the power is within us. And so I love that that seems to be a core central theme to your life and to your books and to your work, is to empower people and realize that you absolutely can dictate how your life goes. I mean, maybe not everything,
Yes.
the things that you can, like you have the power to make a difference over that. And so there's endless amounts of things that I want to talk to you about. So I just want to make sure I cover them all. So I really want to talk to you about what it means to be a modern day witch. And I would even love it. I don't know if you have something on top of mind because I'm kind of springing this on you, but if you have any kind of like ritual or spell for money manifestation, because I
Mm,
have starting to look into that. And I actually watched a YouTube video last night where she was like making this mason jar, like a money good luck mason jar, and she was putting all of these like herbs and like hair and like things I have never heard of, money oil, and she was shaking it all around. And I was like, this is really cool. Does it work? Like I don't know. And I would love to
yeah.
talk to you about that side of life because I feel like I've really haven't explored it yet.
Absolutely. To be a modern day witch, I think is to start with that. And I'm going to actually, I'm going to caveat this with my understanding of magic and witchcraft in my practice comes from many, many years of learning uh, to awaken my power through different sources. And what I mean by that is I've worked with yogis, I've worked with witches, I've worked with shamans, I've worked with astrologists, I've worked with people from many different cultures that have taught different practices. And what that's done is it's helped me kind of look at how similar all of those practices are and really get to the root of how things work. And not to pull the veil open here, but I personally don't do spells anymore. And it's not that I don't think they're cool. Um, and you could, that's fine. But I believe that the true magic comes from the intention behind it and the belief, your belief that you know that making money is a possibility. So I teach a little mini moon magic course, and our little section on money is just that. First of all, it's like you need to have gratitude for the money that you already have. You need to have gratitude for money, period. Second of all, it's believing, it's constantly visualizing and believing and shifting your thoughts to believe that you are able to bring in financial abundance. So when someone is there and you see a witch making, hair and this, I mean, really rituals, and I do rituals, by the way. I don't necessarily do spells, but I do rituals. I have my own altar. And what a ritual is to me is it's a bunch of tools that you're using. It's a process that you're using to get your mind and body and spirit into the mode, knowing that this is the energy that you're about to put out there. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, when I sit down to meditate, I light my candle and my incense and I thank the elements, because doing that every day tells my body, triggers my body. It's almost like if you smell chicken wings and you start to water, right? It triggers my body and my mind that we're about to sit down and do this practice. So this is me getting into the mode. So when I see witches, get the jar and the herbs. I mean, all of these elements have their own properties. And I'm not to say, especially with crystals, like crystals really do have power, but we have to give them the power. So you can take anything you want. You can take all of that, or you can take nothing. It's still your intention and your belief and your power that you are putting into it. Magic is your personal power tied to a very specific intention, and it's something that you want to accomplish, whether that's change or bring money in. So really at the root level, I think to be a modern day witch is to understand what magic really is, and that it is everything that you do is within your power. Manifestation is your belief that you can have that thing. Right now, let's say you don't always have control over how you get it. So I think that's where a lot of people get caught up. How and when? Well, I did a manifestation spell and I don't have any money yet. Maybe the universe is taking you on a journey to build something that's going to create money. I mean, I could say that right now. I started my book series in 2016 and it's 2020 and the first book isn't even out yet. I haven't even made it through the final edit of the first book yet. And I could sit here and go, oh, but where's this destiny? Money, money. But the process that I went to create that is creating a very strong foundation for that success to come in the right way, that is in alignment with my soul and my mind and everything that I need to do in this world, right? So I also want to point that out, is that you know, it really is about your belief, but then it's about trusting that once you manifest that, once you truly believe that, that there's going to be divine timing and you can't really control how it's going to come in. You are going to receive what you need, not necessarily what you want, but what you need in order to receive that thing, in order to get it. So hopefully that answered your question. There's like a lot of different things in there. But yeah, it really is about yourself. It really does continue to come back to your self-power, and you're believing that you have the power to make that thing happen. And once you do, you will see all sorts of things manifest in your life, not just money.
Yeah, I definitely believe that because when I was watching her put the hair and the oil, I was like, that's a little gross. But what was cool about it was that she said, take this with you everywhere. Like, get a small jar and shake it all the time. And she's like, and it just flows and you just shake it all the time. And to me, that was the thing that makes it powerful. It's not all the shit inside of it. It's the fact that you have this token or this symbol to remind you of the fact that you are abundant and that you are attracting abundance. And a lot of people go throughout their day and the only time that they think about money is when they're thinking about how little they have or how much they need it.
Mhm.
And you have this kind of like ritual that honors the money and you say abundant thoughts every time you hold it and you shake it. Your whole perspective is changing to attract more because you're focusing on your relationship with the money and a positive relationship rather than the lack behind it all. And so I think that that seemed like the most powerful thing to me, but I'm glad that you said that because I was like, do I need to go buy all these random ingredients now to do
Yeah.
this? It didn't resonate, but I think
Yeah.
there were so many people in the comments that they just were eating it up, and I was wondering like what your take on that was.
I want to also add to that two things. One, that you actually have to have the space to hold the abundance that you're calling in. So, it's not just about a mindset shift that's like, great, I did a spell, I'm going to get rich. Pamela Chen said this on my show, and I think it was a wonderful example. Is you see lottery winners all the time win the lottery and then go totally broke because they didn't do the work to create the space within themselves to actually have this abundance. So I might know that I'm supposed to have these very popular books and this huge platform, but how long is it going to take me to do the self work to be able to hold space for all of that success and the abundance that comes in, and to be sure that my soul uses that in the right way that benefits other people? So it's not really about getting money. So I love what you're saying. I think people really focus on the lack. And then it's like, well, that's what you're calling in, is the lack. But even if you do shift your mind, you also have to shift your life and what's working inside of you and what's going on in there to be able to hold space for what you want. And people don't always have that. The other thing I really want to mention, because this is a witchy thing, is about the hair. That I really do want to be sure that we honor and respect that when someone pulls their hair and they put it in there, I'm going to be really honest, TMI guys, I use my menstrual blood for rituals. We are respecting our human bodies, and it might sound gross to some, but like a witch is generally very in tune with her body. And when someone puts their hair in a spell, it really is that they're like putting themselves into that, and they're putting their own body and their own energy. So that's where the hair comes from. That's where the menstrual blood comes from. That is the seat of our power, is our womb as women. So, just something to think about is that even though that might not resonate with us, that definitely resonates for some people. And that's why, is because they're so in touch with honoring themselves by putting themselves into the spell work.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad that you said that. And I would honestly love to have you on another episode to talk more about like the womb and even like using the
Yes.
menstrual blood and what it means to be a woman. Cause there's so much that came up for me when you were talking to me. And I think that you, me, and our other friend Kim have so much to say about what it means to be a powerful woman during this time. So I want to have you on again, but I just wanted to touch on the fact that you were talking about holding space for something within yourself. And that's why I think it's so important in your business to do the inner work just as much as you do the outer work. And
Hmm.
so the whole reason like I created my course was to have a balance of the two. And what's funny is like I worked so hard and I got it all out there and then I was like, "Wait, it's only the masculine." I was like, "There's some feminine, but it's like all the strategies and the tactics for how to start a business and run one." And I was like, "It's missing the element that changes you internally, the element that will hold any success. It doesn't matter if you have the strategy, it doesn't matter if you do the manifesting, if you just don't have the energetic match to hold it like you said." And Bridget Esselmont, I pulled a quote specifically from her. She owns Biddy Tarot, which is, I think, a million or multi-million dollar business. And she was saying that you have to have the foundations in place to hold something in your energy field. Otherwise, it will slip away. And when I read that, I was like, that is what I want my course to be about. I want it to be not just starting a business, but magnetizing your inner world to be able to hold and attract more of that. And so I love your work because I feel like that is also in line. You know, you've spent so many years working on your own relationship with your own power. And I think a lot
Mhm.
of is what helps you hold it in. Like once you tap into your power, once you listen to your intuition and you become super in tune with who you are, then you're more able to hold that space for such a big project.
Yeah, and I would like to take that one step further and say you don't even know what the outer work is that you're meant to do until you do the inner work.
Yeah.
Look at my life as an example. I was a producer, I was working in corporate. I had this amazing show and I thought I was that was my thing. I had no idea I was going to be writing a book series. I had no idea I was going to have a Magick Grove in the show. None of that was in my purview until I did the inner work. And now I can see that this is what's in alignment with my life. This is what's in alignment with my soul. So a lot of times I think people go, and that's not to say it's a bad route because I had to go through that in order to get here. So listen to your gut, and even if it doesn't make sense, just go make the thing that you want to make, but understand that until you really fully dive in and do that inner work, that could all go away. And it's not a bad thing. It's just a stepping stone, right? But you might not know what it is you're actually meant to do. You might not be successful at any of those other things. And that's not to say that you didn't try or you're not amazing, but it might not be the thing that you're doing, might not be the actual thing that's in alignment with your soul. And that to me is the human experience. It's the process of going through what we came here, all the karma, clearing it all away, and then finally working through the process of discovering. And I think too many people, especially if they're younger, they get so bent out of shape and they get so self sabotagey and self judgmental about not succeeding when in reality that was all part of the bigger process.
Yeah. And actually, something that astrology taught me, one of the core themes that I had to realize through the planets and the cycles was that things have to die off in order for something new to take its place. And so a lot of times what people will do is they will cling on to what was and they don't want it to die off because
Yeah.
they think that that is in their highest good and because they see that as a loss, but it's only losing something to replace it with something better. But
Yeah.
that's the element of faith and of trust, and it takes so much courage to really trust that your life is going to work out the way that it's meant to.
Yeah.
When you do, that's when things get so much more beautiful. So
And yeah, I
go
just
ahead.
want to note on that, you guys, and I'll be quick. I just can't even begin to tell you how hard it was for me to let go of that show. Like, and that was me. I know that feeling. That was me being like, I need to let this go. And it's hard. So it is not easy to do that.
Yeah, and I think it gets harder the more you resist it, honestly. And it's kind of like that, you know, that Chinese like finger game. The more you pull, the tighter it gets. So just loosen up and you'll see it falls
Yeah.
off and then you'll be
Yeah.
free. So thank you so much. So, can you just leave all the listeners with one tip? Like when you were going through your spiritual awakening, when you were up leveling, what's the one thing that you feel like you could not have lived without during that time? Like, what do you think can help people if they feel like they're going through a spiritual awakening? What advice would you give them, or like ritual, or any kind of like activity to help?
Yes. I would say have self compassion. Have, I mean, you hear people talk about self-love and you're like, what does that mean? And someone put it in a better sense. It was like, it's really about having compassion for yourself. Understand that this is part of the process of being human. You're a soul having experience, and this is why we came. Everyone goes through it. So don't be so hard on yourself. This is a big thing I had to learn. Don't be so self judgmental and don't be so hard on yourself. And just give yourself that space to go through the process without judgment. Self compassion is the only way you're going to get through it. So that would be my biggest tip is like every day, if you're in the middle of going through this right now, if you've just been through it, whatever it is, wherever you're at in your process, try to find as many ways as possible to self-care. Don't keep working yourself to the bone. Really listen to your body. That's a big thing. Your body is going to tell you what it needs. Listen to it. And that is the root of where that compassion comes from. Your inner guide, your inner compass, your inner power is telling you like, look, oops, you need to, like, if you're going to be hard on yourself, you're listening to the thoughts. You're listening to all those judgments that we're actually trying to get rid of in your body. Having the self-love and the self-compassion makes the process a lot easier.
That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on,
Yeah.
Kristen. So, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I do first of all, the Magick Grove, it's the magickgrove.com, and that's magic with a K. So if you
TK.
go there, yeah, Magick, the real way to spell magic, the Magick Grove. That's going to have links to Tea Magick. You're going to see the Moon Magic experience that I host. That's actually starting, I think, in a week. I do it every month for the lunar cycle. And you can probably find a lot of the links there to all the videos. And then I am Kristen Nedopak on Instagram. And I think that's really Instagram, Twitter. I talk on Twitter a little bit, but really I'm doing a lot of things in the Magick Grove right now. My book series is clearly not out yet, but I'm in the process of getting my new website up. So hopefully, if you want to subscribe and find out more, you can go to themagickgrove.com and sign up for our newsletter. And I'm sure I'm going to be talking about it there when it comes out.
Yeah, and of course, all of her information will be in the details of this podcast. Thank you
Yes.
so much for staying tuned. Thank you again, Kristen, and have a good day.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for staying tuned to that episode. I really hope that you enjoyed it. And if you did, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this. Also, don't forget to check out willowsbloom.com to book an astrology reading or to join my business astrology course. I can't wait to see you guys there. Have a great one. Bye.